Welcome to the Sanity Project podcast, where you can awaken your mind to clarity and success even in today's life challenges. We're here to provide insights and solutions that will help you live a sane, healthy, and prosperous life. Here's your host, Joanne Victoria.
Hello, everybody. This is Joanne Victoria with another amazing episode of the Sanity Project podcast. You're here to discover a life of clarity, confidence, sanity, and entrepreneurial success. Our guest today is the expert on data. His name is Kevin Hanegan. He's written a book on that, amongst other things, and the book is called Turning Data into Wisdom. It's available on Amazon and on his website. And he's going to give you all the secrets of how to take data into the real life and use it to create, well, as he says, data into wisdom. Welcome to the show, Kevin Hanegan.
Thanks. I'm really looking forward to this. Thank you for having me.
I appreciate you being here. So what do you consider data or data?
It's actually a good way to start because I think the word intimidates so many people because it brings them back to days of like math class and history, math class in high school and college. And to me, data is not just numbers. It's information. It's information that you use to figure out what you want to do, how you want to make decisions. It could be a number, like in the news during the pandemic, we saw lots of data about COVID, but it could also be a customer review. So I want to go out and buy a coffee pot. What do? I go to Amazon, I look at reviews. Those reviews I can analyze, I can understand what they mean. They're data. Or I want to go on vacation, I want to understand where I should go, and I look at feedback. To me, that's all data and information. It doesn't have to be numbers. It's just information that helps me answer the question that I want to do.
That's interesting. Yeah, I use Amazon for everything, especially my books. And when I want to buy a book, I look at how many people have given a review. The more reviews, the better. So how did you get into this as a working model, as a click.com product?
Yeah, I am a nerd by trade. I'm a computer science and math major. But what's interesting is I don't use any of that now. As I started leaving undergraduate and going into the workforce, I started realizing that more and more people were making, I guess I would say, decisions that I thought were not as ideal. And I'm a big fan of trying to understand why. So like I try to understand myself why they're doing these things and started reading up on the topic. And it got me thinking about like psychology and how the brains make decisions and how we're all biased and how things are evolving so fast that it's hard for the brain to keep up, and ended up going back to school for all of those things. And I just had kind of this light bulb moment that where we are today in the world and society is very different than, a generation ago, a decade ago, centuries ago. And we're seeing this information and data everywhere, news, Amazon, everywhere, but we're not really skilled up or understanding on how it might be misconstrued, potentially intentionally, like if it's disinformation, but it's not as easy to look at a visualization or look at a review and apply what I would call like these soft skills or forever skills to challenge if it really is answering your question, if it's the right context, if we have a confirmation bias where we just say, oh, that's what I thought, it's true, move on, and we don't challenge it. And that's what our company does. We build software that helps people look at data and analytics to make decisions. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of what put me on this path is I think there's an opportunity to improve our lives by making better decisions, by not falling victim to, my God, there's so much data. I'm overloaded. I'm just going to ignore it all.
Right. I mean, if we're talking about years and years ago, I mean, you just asked your family. You asked people that you knew, have you tried this? Have you bought this car? Do you buy this television? And they would give you their response. And since you trusted them, you would rely on that response. And yes, is that what you have found?
Absolutely. And people still do that. But then the problem with that is you don't necessarily innovate because you're asking the same people the same question, you're getting the same answer. But the other thing is, now that the world's changing, what was true maybe even a decade ago isn't necessarily true today. So if I want to ask my parents about something related to like streaming services, they don't use them. They still use cable. Or about the news, they still use a newspaper. Or business models, we have a freemium business model, and those things didn't exist. So people still do that. That was the old school way.
Right.
It's just hard to do that because there's so much net new stuff that didn't exist back then.
Yeah, we could look at it as choices, but it's like changing our thinking. And
yeah, exactly.
It is. And it's, if you think about changing our thinking, you get a little frightened. I would get a little frightened if I'm looking at, whoa, I'm part of this process of changing our thinking. I never knew that would happen before. I never thought about it. And I think that's what's exciting about what you're doing. You're doing the thinking for us, obviously. And because of your books, Turning Data into Wisdom. But you are doing the thinking for us, and we have to sit back and maybe relax into that, or just accept that things have changed. We're hearing all these words that have become popular in the last 5 years, 7 years, something like that. Biases, confirmation bias, that I heard a long time ago, but the biases that we have, and we had them before, but now they have a label. Now they
absolutely they have a label, and to your point of like people accepting, the challenge now is we're going to help do the work for people. They just need to have an open mind to wanting to change. It will make it easy for everyone, but there are some people that are just, I've done it this way for years. I want to continue doing this. And that's what I hope is we open their minds to say they're going to be more productive. They're going to be happier. They're going to be more relaxed if they do embrace the new way forward with that open mindset.
Yeah, we were talking before the show, and I don't want to leave anything out, because we were talking about how doctors were using data to make decisions. And you've said that it was people in the science field or scientific field who were mostly using this source, this method, to use this information. They used it more than anyone else. Is that true, or am I expanding?
Yeah, no, it's right. And I mean, you could at a high level just call it the scientific method. Something you maybe learned in like high school or whatever is you have a hypothesis. And so in a doctor's case, you come in with a set of symptoms, a couple data, a couple tests where you have some numbers, and the doctor has a hypothesis that could range from, you have the common cold, you have a virus that you can't treat with antibiotics, to like a debilitating disease. And what they do is they try to filter down with more data, more tests, more questions, to some level of there's probably 2, 3, 4 things that it could be. Obviously, if there's something that can be confirmed with a test, like a flu test or a COVID test, that makes it 100%. But if not, they're whittling things down. They're doing kind of these differentials, and then they have to make a decision. They try to systematically approach it that way and come down to, it could be one of these 3 things. We're going to treat one of them, and we're going to instantly, in 2 or 3 days, see if it's reacting. And if not, we'll move on to the next one. So it's try to find everything that discredits, like, what are any symptoms this person has that doesn't align with a cold, that will tell me it's not the cold. But they're trained since medical school to do that. Most of us in business, we're not trained like that. In the way our brains work is we have a hypothesis, like, oh, I want to buy this product because I know it's awesome. I'm not even going to read the reviews. And then as soon as we see one review that says there's something positive, our brain says, look, I told you I was right. Let's move on. And we don't look at the potentially 500 other reviews that have critical flaws with it. And that's kind of the confirmation bias. But the key is the doctors do it well, partly because it's life and death. They have to, and partly because they're trained from the beginning of medical schools to follow that process.
Yeah, sometimes too much.
Sure.
I think they're attached to their numbers myself. So we can say that for all time, pretty much for all time, as far as we're concerned in this 2023, that, doctors might have been doing it the longest.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So you talk about speaking to others about this, and you're the chair of the advisory board for the Data Literacy Project. What does that, what does that mean?
Think of it as like where our brains are so overloaded with information right now. There's some studies that came out last year that say, let's just take, thousands of years ago, a typical person back then was probably exposed to like the equivalent of 75 gigabytes of information their entire life. The estimates show today that an average typical person sees that in a day. And so just like you think of exercise, right? Where you have to exercise to stay fit and healthy. Well, the brain is still a muscle too. And we're overloading it with all of this information. And so one of the things that we try to help people, one of the easiest ways you can make better decisions is try to prioritize what is your question? What is your outcome? Because otherwise you're going to overload the brain with all this information. The brain's not going to necessarily know what's relevant to me and what's not because I haven't given it a goal. And then it's just going to get tired. And when it gets tired, just like in exercise and other things, we get sloppy, we make mistakes, we burn out, and we stop doing things. So practicing mindfulness, practicing prioritization of this is what I want is one of the easiest ways we can all just make better decisions. Just tell the brain, this is a priority for me and this isn't a priority. And when I say that, sometimes people think, oh, that doesn't make sense. It's like voodoo magic. And one of the games that I always play if I'm doing this in person is that I usually wear like a pink shirt when I'm presenting. And I tell the audience, the next 5 days, you are all going to notice more men wearing pink shirts than you ever have before. And I get feedback from people and they're like, yeah, that happens. Or they're not actually seeing more people with pink shirts. What happened is we just told the brain that's relevant to me because I mentioned it out loud. So the brain sees them, and as before when they saw them, it just said, no, not relevant, forget about it. It remembers it. Just like if you're trying to buy a car and you're like, I want to look at different white SUVs, you're going to see more of them on the road. Well, you're not. It's kind of highlighting. The brain filters out what it thinks is relevant and what it isn't. But if you don't tell it what's relevant and you sit back and consume all this information, you're going to be tired, cranky, bored, very unproductive.
Aha. So that's it. Yeah. I need a lot of alone time because I get overloaded. My brain might get overloaded and I have to think of things, like right here, we're doing this. So I have to be focused on this because this is my job. You are a guest, so I have to be focused on what you're talking about. But if I were debating whether to incorporate 2 or 3 podcasts at one time, I would really have a problem. The data from several guests. And that's why I think that's why Zoom is working, because you can choose who you talk to. When you're doing a live session on something. You can choose ABC, Mary, Harry, whatever. And that doesn't work when you're in a room full of people as well.
No.
So when you're on Zoom or something similar, Zoom, you can, choose who you're going to talk to. You, the one in the yellow shirt. There's one guy in a yellow shirt. He responds. I mean, it happens a lot faster than when I'm speaking, but that's number one, is data. And number two, you're not overloading your own brain when you're doing that. I know
exactly. And then the other benefit of Zoom too is, you end the call and ideally you put a break in your schedule before the next one. Whereas if you're in person, I don't know about you, I probably get 10x more questions after the presentation than during the presentation when Correct. You're trying to run to the next presentation, and that your brain has no time to slow down and practice mindfulness and get a break. And then my next presentation is not as good.
Right. Yeah. I mean, there are, pros and cons to everything. People who are listening going, no, that doesn't work for me. Well, then try another way. but you have to practice and see what works best for you. So, okay, there's a page here I want. There's a reason that you fill these things out. Okay, so your passion is the intersection of business, technology, learning, and psychology. Okay, so let's talk about each of those quickly if we can.
Absolutely.
Business, technology, learning, and psychology.
Yeah. So I guess start working in the middle with technologies. The world is getting more complex. There is technology. You go hundreds of, maybe even like 50 years ago, things were much more simple. I know personally for my car, I used to be able to do an oil change. Now I get like this check engine. There's so many complicated things that the world is more complicated. So technology is great, but in and of itself, I think us as a society, we over rely on technology and we learn how to use the technology. We don't learn how to apply it and what it means to us. And so we don't use those soft skills. We just blanketly say, okay, I got to learn the next technology to come out. And that in a vacuum is hard. But then you add on to it that as adults, we already have learned so much stuff in our lives. In order to add more stuff, we really have to focus on how adults should learn, and more importantly, not just learn, but unlearn. So I'm learning something new today. It's not brand new. It's just an evolution of what existed yesterday. And I need to forget about yesterday in order to move forward today. And it's hard to do that if we don't know how the adults learn and how our brains work together. And that led me to the psychology of if I need to understand how I can make adults make better decisions by forgetting about the past that's outdated, I need to understand what gets people ticking and how psychology works. And it just all comes together. And I use it at home. You know, I'm a parent, I'm a son, I'm a spouse, and it's been very valuable, but we can apply in business. We don't make good decisions in business because we repeat the history often, the patterns that we're supposed to forget, and we don't do it. So I kind of had this light bulb of let's blend the evolution of technology with how adults should learn and unlearn things, combined with how we apply it to business and how humans like to make decisions with their brain and the psychology of it.
Well, it's interesting. So when you say be in the moment, this is it.
Absolutely.
This is it. And it works, obviously. I say obviously because I have a bias towards that, and it keeps my brain not worn out. You know, if I have too much stuff in my brain, and I'm an example here, audience, you know, I just throw it away. If it's too much, I just push it to the side and I have nothing. And that's not going to work for me in what I'm doing, either here or some other part of my day. So I have to say, okay, put that on hold. And my brain does the job because it knows I'm compartmentalizing, because I know how to compartmentalize. And when we look at things today, we have to do that, be in the moment, because you can't be on top of things with 3 out of the 4. You've got business, tech, learning, and psychology. You can't be on top of it for only 2 of those things, and then the rest you just throw someplace else. You know, you can't be on top of it with learning and psychology, and then for business you're going to use old methods that don't fit into fit it. I don't know if I'm saying this right, but fit into what you're doing today or trying to do or attempting to do. So you really have to pay it. And business is, you know, except for certain people, that group is getting larger. Business is done the way it's been done forever, with minor changes. And yes. And that's not going to work for the world and your mind.
I couldn't have said it better myself. Exactly. And that's the problem, is it sounds complicated, right? There's all these 4 different things going on, but at the end of the day, that's the society we live in right now. And we're trying to make it simple with steps and strategies to work on. But it's a change for people.
It's a huge change because, they're going to say, oh, I know tech. I have that covered. I got somebody that does that. Learning, I have no problem learning the psychology, but the business, yeah, we're going to do it what we did before. Well, it's the same thing. You're going to do it the way you did it before, and then you're going to wind up where you are. So how do you handle that? That's not really a question, because I don't know if you can answer that. But so where do you put your energy? Where do you, I would say you put it in your weakest point, because if you know everything else, you know it. But, but I've been reading a lot of people on social media are doing ABC, but all of a sudden they're doing X, and I'm going, this doesn't fit. And that's the business end of it.
Well, and that's where it's key to prioritize, and easier said than done. Like, what is important to me? And if these 4 things are important to me, like you said, there's a lot of people out there, and I'm a proponent of myself, that believe in, Strength Finder, focus on your strength. Well, the downside with that is you might not ever innovate or evolve if you do that. And if your weakness is an area of critical importance, you're doing yourself a disservice by ignoring it and just focusing on the strengths. So I think in today's world, yes, we definitely like to play with our strengths because we're comfortable, we feel safe and secure. But what we're stopping then is realizing, I need to know the business end. I need to know the technology end. I need to know, the psychology end, but I don't know it. I'm just going to leave it to the side. You're not going to have that, innovative result, or that moment of clarity, or those really great, this is perfect, because you're ignoring a weakness that is critical to you going forward.
Well, I'm looking at business, technology, learning, and psychology. This is going to sound a little weird, but you'll get it. That's 4. 4 is foundation in everything, because without a good foundation, you're going to crash. The house will fall down. Architecture is off. So if you look at it from that point of view, 4, foundation, I can make that happen. But you need all points of your foundation to be strong at the same time. Whatever level of strength you're looking at, it must be at the same time. Otherwise, you got a wobbly house or building or whatever.
Yes, like a Venn diagram where you're looking at the overlap right in the middle of those 4. That's exactly right.
Yes. So I'm going to make this announcement to my listeners, because I usually do this, is to ask my listeners to re-listen to this podcast when they can, but have a pen and paper handy. Number 1, you learn more if you write with your hand. It goes to the brain. And you're not going to remember everything that Kevin said, because you can't. You can't remember all of the insights that he has shared with you. So you need to listen to this again when you're quiet. See, you got to be quiet, and you're taking notes, and you'll learn something from our conversation and from your own inner brain. Okay, we won't tell them anymore. And do you write a lot, somehow making notes and stuff like that, Kevin?
Yeah, I'm actually glad I'm not on video, because the Post-it notes I don't even see the bottom of my desk. But just like you said, you intake the information better if you actually write it down. I find I write it better with a pencil than with a computer, so I'm still myself. Yeah,
people don't realize that the pen and paper, I have a fountain pen that I bought that I haven't put together yet. you have to know how to put a pen together. And so I just do my yellow pads, buy them by the dozens, and I make notes all the time. And my computer, I look at it and there's a detachment there, because it isn't a machine. And, it is just one aspect, technology, of what we're talking about. So it doesn't work for me. But when I write, and it goes from the paper to my hand up to my brain, I'm recording it, literally recording it. So
Absolutely.
what do you have to say to our guests who are listening? What should they do?
I think a couple things. The first thing is, if you were one of those people that heard, we're going to talk about data today, or data, however you call it, and you said, nope, not for me, time out. Just be open-minded that Data is not numbers and statistics. It's not scary, right? It's here to stay. It can help us do many things, but if we don't understand how to work with it, which doesn't require any advanced degrees or anything, we're going to get overwhelmed. I think the second thing I'd like to tell people to get started is when you're at work or you're at home, you have this tough decision to make. You're stressed out. You're looking at too much information. You don't understand what's relevant. Think about, again, the brain as a muscle. And, you know, if you're working out, you got to take a break, a day on, day off, step aside, focus on something else, do mindfulness. I tend to like to stay busy. It's really hard for me to just stop and think about my inner thoughts in mindfulness. So what I've actually found helps me is the brain is vast, right? There are some people that say, no, there's no such thing as information overload because the brain's massive. It is, but if you're doing the same thing over and over and over again, the repetition, the brain gets tired. So I like to then, part of my mindfulness is do something completely different. So if I'm like on a podcast and I'm analyzing numbers and doing all this stuff, later on the day, I want to use the creative side of my brain, and I'll just open up, Paint or Photoshop and do some drawings or infographics. It's still, even though I'm actively working on my brain, it's still calming the part of the brain that's overloaded from everything else. And I think that's a takeaway that people don't understand is we're not telling you to just sit in a room and be quiet in a dark room for like 30 minutes. I'm just telling you to work on something different, not related to what you were just doing, because your brain's already fried. I think those are my two big takeaways, and just challenge everything you see. We don't do it as often. We see data and people tell us 2 + 2 is always 4. So why would I challenge it? But it can be misleading because it's not giving you the right context, or it's not answering the question that you have. So when you see things online, when you see reports, just have a healthy skepticism about what it's really trying to tell you.
No kidding. I want to thank Kevin Hanegan for being here today and really simply explaining a complicated process. Turning data into wisdom. And I thank you, Kevin, for being here today. It's been informative and gets my other parts of the brain working as well.
Mission accomplished then.
Thank you.
Glad you had me.
Okay. Thank you very much.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Sanity Project podcast. Please go to AskJoanneVictoria.com to listen to more podcasts. Check out Joanne's coaching programs and get a free copy of her report, 5 Steps to Achieve Life-Work Harmony. That's AskJoanneVictoria.com. Take care, and thanks for being here.